In ancient Persia, a method known as bande abru develops, which translates roughly to thread and eyebrow. You know it today simply as threading. Fair twisted length of cotton thread is rolled against the skin, trapping individual hairs and pulling them out at the root in a fast, controlled motion. No blade, no chemical paste, just tension and technique. This method proved so effective that it spread across Persia, into India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and eventually into salons across the modern world. Virtually unchanged after thousands of years, India developed its own parallel tradition. Ayurvedic medical texts, the foundation of traditional Indian medicine, include actual recipes for depilatory pastes made from turmeric, chickpea flour, and milk. This was not a fringe practice. It was documented, standardized, and passed down as part of a broader system of health and hygiene, applied to the body as thoroughly as any modern regimen. So by the time you reach the ancient world at its peak, you have flint blades in the Stone Age, copper razors and sugaring in Egypt, tweezing and singeing in Greece, class-coded grooming in Rome and threading in Persia, all converging on the same basic conclusion. Remove the hair. Keep the body clean. Signal something about who you are. But the story does not stop at the edge of the Mediterranean. Travel east into imperial China, and you find a parallel tradition developing almost entirely on its own. Silk thread, twisted and rolled against the skin in a method very close to what Persia was doing at the same time, shows up in historical records as a grooming technique among women of means. Cotton, twine, even fine strands of animal hair could be substituted depending on what was available. The method mattered less than the outcome. A smooth, controlled surface, achieved without a single blade. Meanwhile, further south, communities across parts of Africa and the Pacific Islands developed their own versions of the same basic idea, using sharpened shells, volcanic glass, and abrasive sand instead of metal. Obsidian, when fractured correctly, produces an edge that rivals surgical steel, sharper in some cases than the finest modern blade. A hunter who could shape obsidian into a hunting point could just as easily shape it into something small enough to drag across skin. The knowledge transferred instantly. The same skill aimed at a different target. Notice the pattern forming here. Nobody copied anybody. Egypt did not teach Persia. Persia did not teach the Pacific Islands. Separated by oceans, deserts, and thousands of years, human beings kept arriving at the same conclusion, independently, over and over again. Something about smooth skin mattered enough, everywhere, for people to reinvent the same basic solution from whatever material was sitting in front of them. Centuries later, in medieval Europe, the standard shifted again, this time shaped heavily by religion and class rather than climate or combat. Roberta Millikan, in her study, A Cultural History of Hair in the Middle Ages, describes how European aristocratic women adopted hair removal as a fashion statement tied closely to ideals of purity and modesty. A high hairless forehead became so prized that some women plucked their hairline back by hand, strand by strand, to achieve it. The same instinct that once removed pubic hair for hygiene in the desert heat of Egypt was now aimed at the scalp, in the cold and damp of northern Europe, for reasons that had nothing to do with parasites and everything to do with appearing devout. Do you see how the justification kept shifting while the underlying behavior stayed identical? A desert priestess and a European noblewoman 1,000 years apart would have found almost nothing in common if you sat them down and asked about their gods, their governments, or their daily lives. But hand each of them a blade and ask why they reach for it, and somewhere underneath the different words, you would find the same instinct looking back at you. Hygiene became status. Status became religion. Religion became fashion. The tool changed from stone to bronze to thread to blade, but the core act, removing hair from the body on purpose, survived every single cultural shift intact. That adapted its reasoning to whatever era needed it to mean. That is the part worth sitting with. Notice what has not actually changed. You still reach for a blade most mornings. You may still use wax or sugar paste or a thread-based method at a salon without knowing its 5,000-year lineage. The tools got smoother, the plastic got better. The core act did not change at all. Here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. None of this was really optional pampering for most of history. It was survival, status, and social signaling, tangled together so tightly that no one back then could have separated the three. You do the exact same thing today, mostly without thinking about why. You associate smoothness with cleanliness. You associate grooming with self-respect. Where do you think that association actually came from? It did not come from an advertisement. It came from a Roman citizen buying a depilatory cream in the street. It came from an Egyptian priestess maintaining ritual purity through total hairlessness. It came from a hand pressing a sharpened flint flake against skin in the dark next to a fire. Tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote a word down. Think about how strange that continuity actually is. Most ancient habits died out. Trepanation, the practice of drilling holes into the skull to release evil spirits, is gone. Bloodletting with leeches to balance bodily humors is gone. Entire medical systems, entire religious frameworks, entire methods of measuring time have all been replaced or abandoned. Yet this one habit, reaching for a sharp edge and dragging it across your own skin on purpose, survived every single collapse of civilization along the way. Empires fell. Languages died. Gods were forgotten and replaced by other gods. And through all of it, someone somewhere kept sharpening a blade for exactly this purpose. Why would a habit outlast entire religions? Maybe because it never really needed a religion to justify it in the first place. Hygiene works in any century. Comfort works in any climate. Status signaling works in any economy, whether you are trading grain in Mesopotamia or trading currency on a screen. The specific story changes. The behavior underneath it does not need permission to continue. It just needs a reason that fits the moment, and there has always been one waiting. Consider your own bathroom for a second. You likely do not think about hygiene, status, or ritual purity when you pick up a razor. You think about 10 seconds, a mirror, and getting out the door. The meaning has gone quiet, but quiet is not the same as gone. The instinct is still doing exactly what it did for your ancestors. It is just doing it faster, with less pain and without a single thought attached. That is possibly the strangest twist of all. The ritual survived. The meaning evaporated. You inherited the action without inheriting any memory of why it started. You are not doing something modern in your bathroom this morning. You are repeating a ritual almost as old as human culture itself, using a tool that is simply the latest version of a stone someone chipped by hand. You woke up. You reached for a razor without thinking. Now you know exactly what you were really reaching for. You wake up. You reach for a razor without thinking. It takes 10 seconds. You do not question it, but strip away the plastic handle and the 5 blades, and you are left doing something your ancestors were already doing 50,000 years ago. With rocks. On purpose, that should sound insane. It is not. Grooming is not new. What changes is the tool. Your instinct to remove hair from your body did not start in a bathroom. It started around a fire, in a cave with a sharpened piece of flint, and someone deciding that comfort was worth the risk of a cut. So how did they actually do it? And why did they bother, when survival already demanded everything they had? Start with the material. Flint is a strange kind of rock. Snap it the right way, and the broken edge is sharper than steel fresh off a modern factory line. Archaeologists studying prehistoric toolkits have confirmed this repeatedly. A freshly struck flint flake can outperform a surgical blade in raw sharpness, even though it looks like nothing more than a jagged stone in your hand. Your ancestors knew this. They used it to skin animals, they used it to cut sinew, and they used it eventually on themselves. Picture it. No mirror, no soap, no numbing cream. Just a hand holding a stone edge against skin, guided by touch and nerve alone. It is uncomfortable to imagine. It was probably uncomfortable to do. Why take that risk at all? Here is the twist. This was never really about appearance the way you think of it now. It was about survival math. Hair traps things, sweat, dirt, parasites. In a world without antibiotics, a lice infestation was not an itch you tolerated. It was a health threat. Removing hair, especially in warm, damp areas of the body, reduced the places where lice, mites, and bacteria could take hold. Some researchers argue this is one of the oldest and most practical reasons humans started grooming body hair at all, long before there was any concept of beauty standards attached to it. There is a second theory, and it is stranger. Some anthropologists have proposed that early humans removed hair, including facial and body hair, partly because it reduced what an opponent could grab during a physical fight. Less hair, less to hold on to. Whether that was a conscious strategy or a side effect, nobody can say for certain. But in a world where conflict between rival groups was common, anything that gave you an edge mattered. Hygiene, combat, comfort, three separate pressures, one shared outcome. Hair had to go. There is a fourth pressure too, one that is easy to overlook because it feels almost too simple. Sensation. Anthropologists who study grooming behavior across primates point out that humans are not the only species that removes hair, dirt and debris from the body. Chimpanzees groom each other for hours. It calms them. It builds trust. It releases the same chemical reward system that a hug or a scratch on the back triggers in you right now. Early humans almost certainly experienced something similar. Pulling a sharpened stone across skin was not only functional, there is a good chance it felt good, in the same low, satisfying way that picking at a scab or peeling dried skin feels good today. Function and sensation, working together, reinforcing the same behavior from two directions at once. Now imagine the actual moment, not the concept, the moment. Firelight flickering against a cave wall, the smell of smoke and animal fat, a hand steadying itself against someone else's shoulder. No instructions passed down in writing, because writing did not exist yet. Just one person showing another, hand over hand, the exact angle that avoided a cut. That is how this knowledge moved for tens of thousands of years. Not through books. Through touch, repetition, and trust between two people, close enough to hold a blade near each other's skin. Now fast forward. Thousands of years pass. Tools change. Stone gives way to metal. And one civilization takes hair removal from a survival habit into something closer to an art form. Ancient Egypt. If you think modern beauty culture is obsessed with smooth skin, Egypt got there first and went further. Archaeologists have found razors placed inside royal tombs, buried alongside other daily toiletries, meant to be used in the next life. One was discovered in the tomb of Queen Hetepheres, tucked in among cosmetic tools, as though grooming was as essential to the afterlife as it was to daily existence. Egyptian grooming was not casual. Both men and women removed hair from nearly the entire body. The reasoning was part practical, part symbolic. The Egyptian climate was hot, dry, and dusty. Hair collected grit and invited parasites. Removing it was cleaner, cooler, more comfortable, but it also marked you. A smooth body signaled that you had the time, the resources, and the status to maintain it. The common laborer working in the sun all day did not have that luxury. The elite did. So what did they actually use? Copper razors, sharpened and maintained like precision instruments. Flint blades carried over from older traditions and still valued for their edge. Pumice stones dragged across skin to physically abrade hair away. And something you have almost certainly used yourself without knowing its origin. Sugaring. Heat sugar and water into a thick, sticky paste, spread it against the grain of the hair, press cloth or a strip against it, then pull. The hair comes with it. It is the exact same principle behind wax strips sold in pharmacies today. Victoria Sherrow, in her Encyclopedia of Hair, A Cultural History, documents this Egyptian obsession with smoothness in detail and notes something disturbing hiding underneath the glamour. Not every method was gentle or safe. Some early depilatory pastes included ingredients like arsenic and quicklime, chemicals that could strip hair from the skin but could just as easily damage the skin itself. Beauty, even 5,000 years ago, sometimes came with a hidden cost. Did that stop anyone? No, the practice spread. Consider the maintenance schedule this required. A wealthy Egyptian household likely kept a dedicated grooming attendant, someone whose entire role revolved around keeping a family smooth, oiled, and presentable. This was not a once-a-year ritual reserved for festivals. Evidence suggests it was closer to a weekly or even daily discipline, as constant as bathing. Skip it for too long, and the social message sent by visible stubble was impossible to hide. Your body was, quite literally, a public record of how much time and money you had access to. Move west, into Greece, and the standard becomes even more extreme. In classical Greece, a hairless body, particularly a hairless pubic region, became closely tied to ideas of civilization, dignity, and control over the self. Paige Walker, in her study Genital Depilation and Power in Classical Greece, traces how earlier in the archaic period, elaborately shaped pubic hair was actually a mark of elite status. Later, that flipped entirely. Removal became the new marker of refinement. Look closely at Greek pottery and sculpture from this era, and you will notice something immediately. Depictions of women are almost uniformly hairless below the waist. It was not an accident of the artist. It reflected the standard everyone understood. How was it done without modern tools? Plucking hair by hair using crude tweezers, singeing using controlled flame to burn hair away at the surface. Both were slow, both hurt. Neither stopped people from doing it anyway. There is even a darker cultural echo of this preserved in ancient comedy. In one of Aristophanes' plays, a man preparing to infiltrate a women's gathering in disguise is forcibly held down and completely plucked of his pubic hair as part of the transformation. The scene works as comedy specifically because the audience understood the association instantly. Hairlessness meant femininity. Removing a man's hair forcibly meant stripping something else from him too. Rome inherited this obsession and refined it further, this time as a marker of class rather than gender alone. Wealthy Romans used flint razors, tweezers, pumice, and depilatory creams to keep the body smooth, particularly in more private areas. A study published in the Journal of the History of Sexuality even records that Julius Caesar himself reportedly had excess body hair plucked as part of his regular grooming. If the most powerful man in Rome was doing it, you can guess how quickly it filtered down through the aristocracy. But it was not only the elite. A study published in the journal Toxicology in Antiquity notes that ordinary Roman citizens were also familiar with depilatory products as part of everyday cosmetic culture, not just an indulgence reserved for senators and generals. This was becoming mainstream. Roman bathhouses even employed workers specifically for this purpose, men whose job was to walk through the steam and offer plucking and shaving services to anyone willing to pay. Imagine that as an actual occupation, listed on a tax roll 2,000 years ago. Not a doctor, not a soldier, a professional hair remover, working the crowd at the public baths the way a barber works a modern shop. Rome did not just adopt the habit, it built an entire service economy around it. Here is where it gets interesting. Around the same period, a completely different technique emerges far to the east.